I was born Phoebe Westerfeld in 1798 in Mercer County, Kentucky. Now, that was just 3 years before and 50 miles away from the Great Cane Ridge Meeting. Cane Ridge was a revival held in Kentucky with thousands of people in attendance. It marked the beginning of the Restoration Movement and of the Disciples of Christ, or Christian denomination. More about my church later, though. In 1814, I married John Moore. John served in the War of 1812, but after we married, he settled down and became a farmer. Even though we were from Kentucky, we moved to Alabama. In 1863, John died, and I decided to move to Waco to live with my son, Thomas Moore, and his wife, Eliza Jane. Now, Thomas Moore was a doctor of law and a doctor of medicine. I'm a proud mama. When I arrived in Waco in 1867, it was a rowdy little town of about 1,200 people. But there were 18 of us disciples of Christ believers who met together as church. We didn't have a building and we didn't have a preacher. We met in each other's homes and we were all preachers and missionaries. We were full of zeal. In fact, one lady called us religious tramps because we were always trying to go about doing good, helping the sick, and relieving the distressed as much as we were able. And for that, they called us religious tramps. Well, I wanted us to have our own preacher, and I heard that there was a disciples minister, B.F. Hall, who was preaching in Denison, Texas. And so I convinced my sister, Sally Skidmore, to go with me. There was no cars, no buses, not even trains in Texas at the time when we made that 174-mile journey by wagon. It took us 3 weeks. We had to cross rivers where there were no bridges, and we camped because there were no hotels. But the scariest thing is we were passing right through Comanche Indian Territory. But the trip was worth it. B.F. Hall agreed to come to Waco, and on October 19th, 1870, I said the wrong date, October 29th, 1870, we had our very first meeting. Dr. Burleson over at the Baptist University let us use the chapel for that meeting. And that night we had 30 new members join our group. I was very proud to have been one of the 12 charter members of the church that night. Soon the Baptists needed their chapel, and we moved to the Methodist female college that was in Waco at the time. Now that reminds me of a story. A good Methodist woman was meeting with us, and she heard B.F. Hall say in one of our Sunday night services that he would give anyone the finest Bible to be bought if they could find in the Bible, in the New Testament, sprinkling for baptism. Well, that lady was indignant. She said, I know that verse is there. I've read it many a time, and I'm going to go home and find it, not because I want his Bible, but just to prove him wrong. Well, she never found the verse. But she came back and she said, I found so many things in the Bible that I'm commanded to do that I'm not doing, that I've read myself right out of the Methodist Church. And she became one of our finest members. We were a bit of a vagabond group at the time. We then moved to the courthouse, where we had rough planks with blocks on the ends for pews and candles for lights, and people stood around the walls to hear the gospel. We then moved to the Courthouse Street School and Sam Houston Hall, which was over Jones Livery Stable, and even to Ritchie Hall. Now, we invited the wife of a prominent attorney to visit with us for services one time, and she said, I will never attend worship over a stable. I think she was forgetting that our Savior was born in a stable. What will pride not do? Well, I did live to see the church erect its own building. In 1875, we bought property on South 5th Street and built a church. I died that year, October 12th, 1875. The year has been marked off the marker. I was originally in the First Street Cemetery before my son Thomas moved me to Oakwood. I consider fetching that preacher that started Central Christian Church to be my life's greatest work. What joy I have in knowing I was a charter member. Now, did you do the math? Do you know that I was 72 years old when I made that 3-week wagon trip to bring back B.F. Hall? What I think is important to remember in my story is that you are never too old to fulfill God's will and to fulfill the purpose of your life.